So that's a first for me. Scientists don't usually walk up to music, so Brian deserved it much more than I did. So good morning. What I'd like to do this morning is kick us off and talk about the Hollings Cancer Center and our entrepreneurship efforts. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Hollings and the important role it plays in the state, what I first want to do is take us through our mission, why it's so important, and then talk about entrepreneurship, sort of generally why, an academic cancer center, how does entrepreneurship really fit into the mission of that? I don't think it's an obvious thing, and so I want to get into that and then talk about our entrepreneurs and how we're supporting them, and then try to pull this all together and talk about how we as a cancer center fit into this larger life sciences ecosystem. Okay, so Hollings Cancer Center, so this is the only NCI designated cancer center in the state. And what that means is, so NCI is a National Cancer Institute. It's one of the institutes that make up the NIH, the entire NIH. And so there are thousands of cancer treatment centers around the country, fair to say. That's not what makes an NCI designated center. You have to excel in 3 areas. So it's cancer care, so that's the clinical piece, but then also cancer prevention and cancer research. So you have those 3 pillars, and you have to excel at all of them. There's only 71 of these NCI designated sites throughout the country. And so we're the only one in South Carolina, and that's a big deal. And so you have to excel in those 3 areas, and our mission is to reduce the burden of cancer in the state of South Carolina. Pretty stated simply, not an easy task though. And so this is how we do it. We pull from all, so Hollings is part of MUSC, and we pull from all the academic departments at MUSC to bring together over 100 scientists and clinicians under that common mission. And so you can see we have, this is by the numbers, we have a pretty large research budget annually, $45 million, and then a really robust clinical trials office. So at any given time, we'll have 200 or more clinical trials going on. And that's really critical to our mission, because what those clinical trials do is they bring the best, the newest treatments and give our patients here in the state access to those cutting edge new therapies. And so that's a critical piece to being an NCI designated site. And I think also that's how entrepreneurship fits into this mission that I'll talk about in a second. Because what we want is we want to be developing new treatments, new processes, new methods that can be rolled into these clinical trials. So homegrown, built in South Carolina type products that we can then give access to our patients with. So that's a bit of a preview of entrepreneurship. And this is for our catchment area, which is the entire state. To get to another NCI designated cancer center, you'd have to go all the way to Atlanta, to Emory, or 300 some miles north to North Carolina, Lineberger Cancer Center in Chapel Hill. And so everywhere in between is our catchment, and so that ends up being our entire state. So what you're seeing on this map are all of our sites, either Hollings sites or affiliates that serve these populations. And many of these are underserved, very rural populations that without this cancer center would not have access to this kind of care that they need. So that's a bit about our center. I want to switch gears a little bit here and tie in entrepreneurship. So what you're seeing, these 4 groups, these are our research programs at Hollings Cancer Center. So we have cancer biology. This is understanding the molecular and genetic basis of cancer so we can better understand it, treat it, prevent it. Cancer control, so these are population sciences type programs that look to find new ways to prevent cancer and go into underserved populations where cancer outcomes are very poor and improve them. We have tumor immunology, which is understanding how the immune system prevents cancer in the first place and how we can harness it to treat cancer. And then also developmental therapeutics. So we want to be developing new treatments in-house and getting them into those clinical trials that I mentioned. And so this is really where entrepreneurship comes into play here. And so if you look at what I'm illustrating here in this slide is, so as an academic center and as academic scientists, this is what we do really well, I would say, scientific discovery. So we make discoveries, we publish papers, we train students, we get grants, and those are all incredibly important things to our mission, don't get me wrong. But what we don't want is that those discoveries to just remain as discoveries and big ideas. We all do this work because we want our ideas and our work to to be translated into something meaningful for others and patients in particular. And so this is really, this is what we want to do. We want to take those discoveries and we want them to have medical impact, and that's the translational process. And really the way to do that is through faculty entrepreneurship. One of the ways, I would say the major way to do it. And what I mean by faculty entrepreneurship is investigators paying close attention to things like intellectual property early on in the process of the project, thinking about patents, thinking about positioning their work for downstream partnerships with industry, because that's going to be very important in that translational process. Things like startup companies, things like small business grants. And so this should not be done 10 years into a study. My argument would be this needs to be done from day one and to be thinking about these things if we truly want to be engaged in translational research. So that's where I see entrepreneurship playing an important role. And many of you have seen this before. This is the Valley of Death slide, right? Not Death Valley where Clemson plays football. I know there are probably a few Clemson fans in here. Safe bet, I think. But the Valley of Death where good projects go to die. And what happens is here we are in the academic process, and down here is where industry really does what it does, is commercialize products and market them and get them into the hands of patients really well. That's what they do. And I think the sentiment, at least when I was training 20 years ago, the sentiment was, we as academics, we do the early part, and it's industry's job to come in, take our findings, commercialize them, and turn them into something, and we sit back and watch. And it's absolutely the wrong way to think about that. And that sentiment has changed, fortunately. And the reason why is because the work that we do down here is way too early for industry. There's too much risk. We think we publish a paper and that's enough, and it's just not. There are a lot of early development steps, risk mitigation steps, prototype development, et cetera, that need to be done before industry is even going to take an interest in what we're doing. And so if we do not engage in these Valley of Death studies, and we don't carry the project through those early development steps, that project is just likely to die. And that's not what we want. And so it's the responsibility of people like me and faculty member and the academic institutions to understand that and to support people who want to do that type of work. And it's critical, again, to our mission. And so the question becomes, well, how do we do this? And I would say the best way to do it is through the federal SBIR, STTR program. So this is SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grants. STTR is Small Business Technology Transfer Research Grants. And if you look at early seed stage funding, and again, this is looking at that early Valley of Death, sort of how do we get through there, that seed stage, you would say, that federal program is really the #1 source of funding in the world for that. So if you look at number of investments, SBIRs and STTRs really dominate that compared to VCs, and that's total number of investments, and it's also total dollar amounts. And then, if we get later on in the project, that's where venture capital really kicks in, and they tend to kick in a lot of money. But again, that SBIR program, that's where we really need to be looking, and I think South Carolina has done an outstanding job. We've seen an explosion of these grants at Hollings, and it's really a critical thing. So the federal government, recognizing there being this need, stepped in, and I think has filled that role very well. And so this is cool. So this is data that I on South Carolina that I took from the NIH Reporter. So these are SBIR, STTR grants from the last 10 years to give you an idea of the progress that we've made. And the Hollings Cancer Center, our data mirrors this as well. So if you look at the number of awards submitted, that has tracked up over the last 10 years. If you look at awards that have been funded, that has tracked up over the last 10 years. If you look at our success rate, it's about 25% or so, 22, 25% or so, which is really, really good. The NCI's average rate per year is usually around 15% or something like that, so we're doing really well there. And then if you look at total dollar amounts, it's tracked upward. So this is outstanding, and we want to see this continue. This is only in health, too. So this is NIH. This is not DOD. This is not NSF. This is just NIH. So these are really great numbers. I'll say, though, also, we don't want our projects to stay as SBIR stage projects. This is a stepping stone. So I think that's where we really need to be looking next, is how do we take these from being seed stage projects to being legitimate businesses with building out teams and a product, and you know, that's maybe for a different discussion, but the SBIR program serves its purpose, and we're doing a great job here in the state with it. So now I want to highlight some of our entrepreneurs at Hollings Cancer Center. So the first one I want to talk about, this is work done by Jennifer Dane and our cancer control program. And if we look at smoking cessation, so I think we can all agree that smoking is a high-risk behavior for developing cancer. We don't want people to smoke, but in South Carolina, too many people still do smoke. We're about in the bottom third of all the states in terms of smoking. And then an emerging sort of related issue with smoking is adolescent vaping. So nicotine vaping, it's not a healthy habit. If you're an adult and you smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day, switching to vaping may be a better habit for you, but if you're a teenager, you've never vaped before, it's not a good idea to start. And the data is showing that those kids tend to go on to become smokers of actual cigarettes. And so what Jen has done, and she's not new to this, but so she does a lot of work with developing mobile applications and behavioral modifying applications. And with her company, Behavioral Activation Tech, this is a snapshot of her app called VapeX. And it's really, these are evidence-based methods that you could go to a therapist and sit with them, and these are tried and true methods, or you could have access to them on your phone. So this is in that telehealth space where easily accessing these evidence-based methods to get teens to stop vaping and modify their behaviors. And Jen's been really prolific in getting small business funding to do that. There's a list of phase 1s and phase 2s. The phase 2s are quite a bit of money, upwards of $2 million that she's brought to the state for this work. And she's not new to this technology. She has other behavior modifying apps like for anxiety and depression called Motivate's another one. So she's doing some outstanding work. And then I want to highlight Glycopath. So Glycopath, you'll hear from them later. This is outstanding work by Peggy Angel, Rick Drake, and Anand Mehta in the pharmacology department. So there's this cluster of individuals who have a common interest, and that interest is in proteomics, specifically understanding how proteins become glycosylated. And so if you look at proteins, they're decorated with all of these different sugars. That's what happens to them, real basically. I mean, it's a whole thing. I'm not doing it justice, but it gets decorated. The proteins get decorated with sugars, and those sugars change with disease states, including cancer. And so what they've done is they've developed this glycotyper technology, which can detect those changes in glycosylation of proteins, which is an indicator of early cancer development. And we all know that if we identify and diagnose cancer early, the outcomes tend to be better. And so this is really important in that area of cancer detection. And you can go and check out their website. They have a couple of products that they're developing, and this is them with a picture of their instrumentation. They have, I would say, world-class instruments and resources at MUSC. This is really an outstanding group, and you're not going to find this elsewhere in the state, maybe not in the world either, I would say. So check them out, glycopathcom. I'll highlight myself here. As Brian mentioned, I'm also an entrepreneur. So lucagen Therapeutics is a company that I started. And one of the things we're really excited about right now is immuno-oncology. So we have a cancer vaccine program that is looking really good, and not a COVID vaccine, a cancer vaccine. And so what it does is it trains the immune system to identify proteins on cancer cells as being foreign and to train the immune system to go and attack them. So that's really an exciting project, and also a bispecific antibody program as well. And lucagen's been very fortunate with small business grants. I'll also note that this picture, I found this the other day. So this is, we all went to the BIO meeting in Philadelphia a few years ago before the pandemic, and there was a whole delegation from South Carolina, and it was really awesome exposure for the state. Aaron did an awesome job pulling it together, and hopefully now, well, hopefully the pandemic will allow us to go and do that again. It was just a ton of fun, and I thought it was great for the state. And then lastly, I'll highlight Nancy DeMoore. So Nancy's one of our surgical oncologists, and she's developed a monoclonal antibody to a really exciting target in cancer. It's called SFRP2, but it's overexpressed in a lot of different tumor types. And she's working with a local company called Innova Therapeutics. and they're developing this and moving it toward clinical trials. They have FDA orphan drug designation for pediatric osteosarcoma, a disease that really needs new therapies. And so we're really excited about Nancy's work to see where this goes. And so those are our entrepreneurs. Now the question is, how do we build and grow this? We've had sort of a grassroots effort with investigators kind of doing this on their own, and we want to find ways to really support it better and try to grow it and integrate it into the DNA of the Cancer Center, again, because we view it as being critical to our mission. And so one of the newer things, so this is a program that came together multiple offices at MUSC. So the Cancer Center, of course, and our director, Ray Du Bois, who's a international figure in cancer research, Jessie Goodwin, who is our Chief Innovation Officer in her office, and then the Foundation for Research Development that's headed by Michael Yost. They all came together and pitched in support for grant funding for pilot projects that are geared toward developing new intellectual property for cancer-related projects. So again, trying to push and encourage this. How do we get commercial products out of our projects, and how do we do that from the beginning of the project? How do we integrate that into what we're doing, plant a flag in the ground and say, this is really what we want? And so these projects are going to kick off intellectual property and patents, and so we're excited about that. We have a number of applications that we're reviewing right now. And then how do we train our trainees, right? We're an academic institution. That's a huge part of our mission. And I would say that, you know, I have students and postdocs in my lab, and what I've noticed is that these trainees tend to have different career aspirations that I did 20 years ago. Many of them aren't necessarily interested in running an academic lab and being a PI, and most of them won't be that even if they wanted to. It's a very competitive career track, and so many of them are interested in alternative careers, and so how do we help these trainees get onto that entrepreneurial track? And really a cool thing that NCI did was they released an RFA just last year, which is designed to support a senior postdoc, so someone early in their career. And what it would do is give them a year of training at the university and then 3 years of funding at a small company. Really a cool mechanism. It's called the Small Business Career Transition Grant. And I'm really excited about this because one of my fellows, Rita Robinson, who's absolutely perfect for this award, is going to be one of the first recipients. So it's really a big grant, and he's going to work on this cancer vaccine project that he has really been critical in developing, and it'll give him a chance to work at MUSC for a year and then move to lucagen and start a career path there as well. And we want to continue to find different ways to do this through training, through T32s, to however we can do it to really try to promote this and identify our young scientists and develop them toward this path. And so with that, I'll pull this all together. And so I've told you about our mission and our entrepreneurs, and I think the next piece is how do we move forward? And I think it's really understanding how we can integrate into this larger group. And so there are all sorts of ways I think we can do it that I'm highlighting here. We want to be involved with industry. We want to have partnerships that bring new products into their pipeline and also support our programs. We want to be involved with investment firms that need new projects to build their portfolio while at the same time supporting our projects which need funding. We want to be involved with talking to government and instituting and drafting policies that are going to make things more, to help the state grow this life sciences industry. We want to be involved in those conversations. We are the only NCI designated site in the state. That's a big deal. We should be in those conversations, and we intend to do that. And we want to continue to kick out startup companies, have our programs become commercial projects that are in startup companies to feed that ecosystem. We want to provide talent to the companies in the state, and of course we want to be involved with this group, SCBIO and other economic development groups like SCRA in the state, and to help this. We've seen incredible growth. We've seen that over the last couple of days. It's been a big part of our conversation, and we want to be part of that continued growth as we move forward. So with that, I want to keep us on time, and I will end there with this picture of the beautiful city that I get to work in, and really a privilege to be able to do that, and I'm lucky to be able to work with this group and be an MUSC employee and call Charleston my home. So thank you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of your day. Come talk to me if you want to discuss any of this. So.